So I don't know if this episode's going to be filed under a regular Writer's Lens episode or if this is going to be filed under the Narrative Wars in the future. I really don't know, but I wanted to do sort of a reactionary episode to an article that I read about a week ago. And this article was talking about an upcoming film and the producer's thoughts behind the film. And since this is a podcast that deals with storytelling, and it's a podcast that deals with cultural hot buttons and narratives and all kinds of stuff like that, this article was jam-packed with all those things. So let's just get right into it. And welcome to the Writer's Lens. I'm Josh J.C. Alfelto. This episode is entitled Mulan and #MeToo. So I think just by having #MeToo in this episode, I might get more downloads than I have in recent weeks, just because, again, this is a bit of a cultural hot button right now, this topic of Me Too. I mean, it's carried over from, was it last year or the year before when Me Too first kind of burst onto the Twitter sphere? I don't know. But anyway, let's backtrack a little bit here. So I said this was going to be an episode talking about a reaction to an article that I had read, and the article was on yahoo.com, and I don't normally peruse Yahoo, but my wife had found this. She was kind of, I don't want to say fumbling around, but she was looking around online and was reading about Mulan, the upcoming live-action film that both of us were pretty excited about. And she started reading this article, and here there were some questions being asked of the production team over at Disney about what they were going to do with the live-action film, since if you've been tracking with Disney, they've basically been rehashing all of their classics from the last 20, 30 years and putting them into live-action remakes because it's Disney and that's what they do. So we've had the Lion King, we've had Aladdin, we had Cinderella. I think they're making another Cinderella at some point. There was Beauty and the Beast. Basically, many of the really big films that Disney rode the wave of during the 90s, they've been redoing. And so Mulan is the latest one to catch hold of the remake bug and run, full on into the horizon of making it a reality. Now, the interesting thing about this live action film is that there's going to be a lot of deviations from it as opposed to some of the other films that have come out. So Aladdin had a little bit of a different ending in it. The Lion King was almost tit for tat. I think it was like the exact same story. Except for that the animals were, from what I understand, very expressionless. I've still refused to see it because I don't want to taint the original one. I don't want to. That's just me personally. And then Beauty and the Beast was okay. I mean, again, it's my opinion. I mean, you can have your own about it. But for the most part, the stories that have been getting remade are very, very, very similar. Even down to the lines within them are very close to the originals that were made by Disney. Yet Mulan is taking a slightly different approach, and the production team has been very candid about that. Now, according to this article, again, I'm going off of Yahoo, all right, the production team at Disney decided that they were going to do something a little bit different with Mulan because of the nature of the character and the relationship that she has with the Chinese army. Now, you might say, well, what does that have to do with Me Too? What does it have to do with, sort of issues of female empowerment, etc. I thought this movie was about a woman who becomes empowered by her ability to show that she's as good as any man in the army. Well, apparently Disney didn't think that was good enough. So what they've done is they've created a new narrative in this story. Again, I'm going off the article. They've created a new narrative where Mulan will no longer have a romantic interest within the army. They've removed her character, or not her character, but the character whose name is Shang, who was her sort of commanding authority when she first joins the army. He's been removed completely and now has been replaced by an older male character who is going to act as kind of like a father figure, like a mentor. And so my first gut reaction to all this is like, well, why? Why would you eliminate the love interest in this film? Like, what grander purpose is this serving to eliminate the love interest. I mean, isn't this what Disney is usually about? Disney is typically about a good love story, despite the heartache and the love loss that you might see in the beginning of a lot of Pixar and Disney films. Disney's also very good at killing off parents, in case you didn't know that. Why was this love interest removed? Well, according to this article, the team of producers and writers felt like in the wake of Me Too, having an officer that is of higher rank, who is a male, and having that person be the love interest over a female subordinate was somehow going to cause a lot of friction for those that are very strong Me Too supporters. Okay, so full disclosure here, I mean, this is obviously an opinion piece for me. My first response was I think that's a little bit overblown and ridiculous. And there's a couple reasons why that is. And I want to read from the article, and I also want to read why I think this is overblown and why I think that this was a poor decision on their part. I mean, they're still going to make millions of dollars, don't get me wrong. But I still think that this was a poor decision on the part of Disney. And so let's just move into it. So within the article, it says, like Shang's signature song goes. Okay, so Shang has this song, in case you didn't know, that says, we're going to make a man out of you. And it's obviously this interesting paradox of Mulan is a woman, but she's there and everyone thinks she's a man. She's under the guise of a character named Ping. And everyone is treating her like a man because she's hidden herself like a man. She presumes, or not presumes, she presents herself as a man. And so all of the male characters believe that she is a man. You know, she tries to talk deeper. She tries to walk, like a man. She puts on heavier clothing so that she can kind of hide her figure, if you will. She does all these things to mask herself to be part of quote-unquote man's world in the army. Because again, within the story, if a woman joins the army, it's punishable by death. She's not allowed to be there, but she is anyway because she's trying to save her father. She's trying to keep her father, who was wounded. He's a veteran warrior, keeping him from having to serve in the war that he was called forth by the emperor to fight in. So that's a little bit more backstory, of what's going on. Now, like the song goes within the film, We'll Make a Man Out of You. Again, I'm quoting from the article now. He somehow makes men out of his soldiers in training, and in the process finds himself drawn to Ping in particular. By the end of the movie, romance has blossomed between the captain and his best fighter, whose real identity is exposed before the climactic battle. Now, first thing I gotta say, this part here that says Shang is drawn to Ping in particular is ridiculous. No, he's not drawn to Ping in particular in any romantic sense because Ping is a guy. Okay, Ping is supposed to be a dude in the story. There's absolutely no inclination in that part of in this part of the story that would make you think that Shang is interested in Mulan. If anything, you think Mulan is somewhat interested in Shang. Okay, there's almost kind of like a giddy kind of, I'm not so sure. But then as she finds herself through the training that she goes through, she becomes more confident, and therefore she can stand up to him because there's a very pivotal point where she actually stands up against him to make a very critical decision that saves the entire battalion, if you will, from the onslaught of the Mongols, and they're able to escape with their lives. So she does something very heroic, again, becoming every bit a good soldier as the rest of the men in the Chinese army. Okay, so this whole line about Shang being drawn to Ping during this process is ridiculous. Okay, it's ridiculous. It's not true. You can't really read into it that way. The only reason why he takes interest in her is because she's good. She has the attributes of a good soldier. She has improved so much. She takes down. There's a part in the film where she climbs up the top of this totem pole and throws, I think it's an arrow. There was an arrow that Shang shot to the top of this totem, but you had to use these weights to climb up the totem, basically. And she figures out how to do it. All the other men can't do it. She figures it out, and she throws the arrow down at his tent on the morning that he wakes up and sees that she was able to accomplish it. No one else was able to do it. And from there is the middle of the song, We'll Make a Man Out of You. The montage shifts now. She's able to do all these things. She has confidence now. She can compete with the men. And she's now a standout soldier. That's why he ends up being drawn to her, because she's good, right? Because she's good at this now. It's not because there's some sort of strange romantic interest now. No, he's treating her like a man. She treats him like a, commanding officer, etc. Okay, so this whole being drawn to thing is ridiculous. So during that montage, Mulan goes from a ho-hum soldier to an extraordinary example of hard work and perseverance. That's it. Okay, there's not much else to draw from that. But again, Disney or the team over there deciding that in their wisdom that somehow this is a bad situation. Okay, this is a bad situation then. So let's just go on. Okay, we're going to continue down the article and see, well, why did they decide to do this? Why did they decide to do this in particular? So again, quoting from the article, this is now Jason Reed, who's the executive producer. He said, quote, "I think particularly in the time of the Me Too movement, having a commanding officer that is also the sexual love interest was very uncomfortable, and we didn't think it was appropriate," Jason remarked. Going on, and I quote, "In a lot of ways, that it was sort of justifying behavior of what we're doing everything we can to get out of our industry." Okay, so again, let's recap a little bit of what's being said here. In the wake of the Me Too movement, a commanding officer who is also the sexual love interest, this causes a conflict here. The idea that there is a man above a woman in terms of rank, he's the love interest for her, she's the love interest for him. It's kind of like, the CEO and the secretary, that sort of cliche storyline that's out there, or, the boss and his, admin assistant, who kind of does a lot of the daily things for him, etc. There's this dynamic that's going on that again, Disney feels like this is really tricky territory now to navigate. Okay, so at the end of his comment, he says, "In a lot of ways, it was sort of justifying behavior of what we're doing everything we can to get out of our industry." Here's again my response. First of all, Mulan is not the love interest of the commanding officer until the end of the film. This is after Shang finds out that Ping is a female. He doesn't even know that she's a woman. Doesn't even know that Ping is a woman until after the fact. I mean, after she saves his life, and after he is asked to take her life, after she's found out, after she's been almost mortally wounded, she's been cut, they have to bandage her up. They basically have to bandage her, and they find out that, of course, she's a woman, so she has breasts. Now, it's a Disney film. At least back in the day, it's a Disney film, cartoons, so they don't actually show any of that, but they give the inclination, they find out that, yes, she is indeed a woman. So Shang is tasked with killing her. That's the penalty, but he throws his sword down and he says, "A life for a life, my debt is repaid, I'm not going to take yours because you saved mine." Okay, very honorable thing for him to do. And then he walks away from her. There's no kiss goodbye, "Oh, I wish we could have had what we were going to have when you were a man," etc. All this kind of stuff. No, that's not the narrative at all. Even at the end, near the end of the film, when the the barbarian group, I want to keep calling them the barbarian horde, even when they infiltrate China and they come for the emperor, and there's this big parade because supposedly the war is ending and the emperor is there, and the villains show up and they kidnap him. Mulan is trying to convince Shang that the enemy is within their midst, and he blows her off. He wants nothing to do with her, right? He wants nothing to do with her whatsoever. Does this sound like a situation where he's like, "I can't wait to be with her again whenever we get back to the city, whenever we get back to China"? No, none of that is even close to being true. Second of all, are we supposed to be setting up scenarios where men and women are not allowed to have romantic relationships inside of their work environment? I mean, is this part of... I mean, is this now going to become something where we say, well, it's culturally unacceptable that a man and a woman inside of a, office space or working in the same building, that if they were both single, that it would be sort of a faux pas if the two of them started to go out? Now, I've worked in office spaces, and I still do. Okay, I still work in an office with men and women alike in there. Now, I'm married, of course, so I'm not looking or anything. But the dynamic of having people who work together and who might be of a romantic interest to someone else, if they're single, I mean, that happens all the time. I mean, it happens when you're out and about. It also happens in a workspace. And if you're going to shove people together for 8 hours a day, who could potentially develop romantic feelings for each other. I mean, that's a reality of things that can happen. So we can't ignore this as though it's just never supposed to happen, because it does. Okay, it totally happens. All right. I mean, even even in the workspace that I've been in most recently, there are two people in different departments, but in the same building, that are dating each other. All right, they're dating each other. Okay, this guy and this gal, they met at work, and that's how they started dating. That was where they were able to meet one another, was at work. But I just find it kind of interesting that we are, I want to say we, I mean, it's more so just the direction of this production team, that the idea of a man and a woman meeting each other through a work-related function and saying, well, we're not really sure about this because there's a guy who has a higher rank and there's a woman who's got a little bit of a lower rank. We find that to be a little bit of a problem. Why is it a problem? Well, because of something that I would say is actually very justifiable, that many men in the past have taken advantage of. They've taken advantage of women who maybe were interns, or who were their secretaries, or who were admin assistants, et cetera, et cetera. And there's a whole other narrative there of sort of this glass ceiling. Women can't move past management positions, et cetera. There is a legitimate argument there. Okay, so I'm not trying to be naive to that or ignorant to that. I totally get that that's something that has taken place for a lot of women in the workplace. But what is the overarching story here? Right? Like, we've made a lot of advancements in our culture. We've made a lot of advancements. We have women who are business owners now, or CEOs, or controllers who've moved up the ladder of success, who have authority over other men in positions. Okay, even when I started working right out of college, when I got my quote unquote first office job, there were many managers over top of me that were women. Okay, there were several women actually that were over top of me that had to dictate what I was doing, on a weekly or monthly basis or whatever it was. So I've always been sort of familiar with this idea of having female superiors, women that are above me or whatnot. So it's this romantic element that now becomes a very gray area, like, what is okay? And I know many HR departments across the United States are still trying to figure this out. Like, what's acceptable? Should they be allowed to date each other? Should they be allowed to go out with one another? People can do what they want in their spare time, but when they come to work, they're expected to work, right? You don't want certain, romantic tensions causing your work to slack off. Otherwise, that becomes a problem. You could get, I think employers reserve the right to terminate people if they feel like they're not performing based upon some sort of romantic, tension or whatever is going on in the workplace. That's fine. But if we create a narrative around the idea that these kinds of relationships should never happen, I mean, people are going to break those rules constantly, right? It's just gonna boil up even more. So what do we do about that, right? Like, what are we supposed to do? And it's interesting because in listening to a few of some of my favorite personalities on social media, one of them being Jordan Peterson, whom, Jordan, I hope you're feeling better, man. I don't know if you're listening to this podcast, but I know you've had a bit of a really rough time with your health as of late, so just know that people are praying for you, man. Jordan had done an interview a while back where they were talking about men and women in the workplace, and he brought up sort of this rather candid question around whether or not women should wear makeup in the workplace. And he got completely, I want to say destroyed, but he was attacked for his comment. And he's like, look, I'm not saying women shouldn't wear makeup. I'm not saying women shouldn't wear makeup either. I'm not saying that at all. Okay, let's just put that on record. But the question was brought around this idea of what is acceptable in a business environment between men and women and the way they interact. And Jordan was saying, well, look, if women stopped wearing makeup, would that change the dynamic? Would that make things more of an even playing field if women weren't allowed to wear, certain outfits? If men weren't allowed to wear certain outfits, if men weren't allowed to wear cologne, let's go both sides of the aisle here. If these kinds of things about presentability were to be changed and people had to conform completely to a certain dress attire, how would those relationships shake out? Would we still have, some sort of sexual tension in the workplace? I don't know. I mean, that's the experiment, of course, and Jordan, I think, makes the observation, we still don't know all the rules yet. Now, I would argue that there are certain types of rules and proper engagements that you can make based upon maybe your worldview, based upon what your belief structure is, or what you believe your morals, what's guiding you from your moral center. I would say that there are certain rules that people would have. But in terms of operating in a free market, open society, capitalist country that we are, what are the rules for those things? Well, again, HR is continuing to keep up, and it's ever evolving, ever changing, and we continue to see how that is playing out. So anyway, that was the next point on that. But I wanted to sort of bring out this last point as kind of a, we're coming in for a landing here with this Mulan and the Me Too situation, is that I've talked about what the actual narrative of Mulan was in the cartoon and what they're trying to make it out to be in this film, with this idea that you can't have romantic relationships between commanding officers and whatnot. I think that by going this route, honestly, Disney's actually hurting themselves. And they're hurting, I'm trying to think of the best way to say this too for our podcast. I think we're not only hurting the point of the original film, we're hurting the narrative around women's empowerment in general. And you might say, well, Josh, what the heck? We're taking out this guy who was a captain, and she's a subordinate, a private soldier or whatever. So obviously we're not placating into that narrative, etc. No, look, here's the deal. The whole point of the film, the story, was that Mulan is a woman. She lives in a man's world of war. She joins that world. She proves she's just as good. And not only that, she proves that she can even do some things that they can't. She ends up saving the country. She saves the emperor in the end. And that was the whole point of the film. She was trying to figure out where she belonged, because everyone around her culture, society, all the rules around them told her she had to be something, and she ended up kind of blazing her own trail. She ends up fitting in. And not only that, she ends up basically, at the end of the film, Shang is now interested in her. Okay, he's interested in her now. He comes courting her, which kind of fulfills everything that was going on at the beginning of the film. She was, unsure of who she was. She was unsure of, how, she might make her parents happy by, getting married to someone good or whoever it would be, and making the family proud. And here she ends up doing kind of the best of both worlds. She kind of, knocks down a wall for women in terms of being involved in the army, and then she ends up dating the captain, So this is empowered moment for her, right? This is, the whole point of the film was her becoming empowered by kind of, breaking through all of those barriers of what people said she couldn't do or what she wasn't allowed to do, and then proving that she could have a place in that space. She was still a woman, obviously. I'm not saying she became a man. I'm saying she was still a woman the whole time. But that was the point of the film. So now what you're doing in not in retrospect, but now what we're doing going forward is we're saying, no. She can't do that. She's not allowed to do that. In fact, we're going to take out that romantic love interest and make this all about her and this sort of mentor character, this father figure who's going to take her under his wing and sort of guide her through this process of becoming a soldier and what it takes to fight and all these other kinds of things. Okay, that's great and all, but she already has a father figure. In the original film, she loves her dad. Her dad loves her. And there's a great moment at the end of the film where he says the greatest gift and honor is having you for a daughter. It was like part of the original trailer for the film that made it so popular. The fact that the father approved of his daughter Mulan for what she was able to do and what she was able to accomplish. So now, with this new film, with this new narrative, she's got two dads. She's going to have a dad at home, and the dad who's mentoring her and in the army for whatever reason now she needs another mentor. And there's no budding love interest in this. Now, the movie looks really interesting, I guess, from just an action standpoint. It looks like the cinematography in it is really good. But I'm really concerned about this narrative. I just don't understand why the team, I guess, in one part of me understands why they did it. Another part of me thinks, why did you go through with it? Like, was it really something that you had to be this sensitive about? I don't know. Again, I don't think so. This is my podcast. I'm allowed to have my own opinion on the subject. But I guess what do you guys think based upon that information? Now I know there's a lot of people who might listen to this and they might say, Josh, look, you're not a girl, you're not a woman, you haven't been through, the concrete jungle and know what it's like for women who are up against these things. Look, again, I'm not trying to say I'm ignorant to that reality. I know that there are struggles that women have had in the workplace. I get it. Okay, I don't quite get it because I'm not a woman. But I'm also not going to pretend that these kinds of things don't happen where people become romantically interested in each other regardless of their rank in a company. Okay, I'm not going to pretend that doesn't, like, women who are, managers and they have subordinates who are men that maybe they're interested in. That can happen, okay? It could happen, right? It does happen. So ignoring that, I think, is a problem. But I think creating a narrative where, I don't want to say that we don't ignore it, but I'm just saying that if you're trying to change the story, that's what I really have a beef with. The story was great as it was. Why are you trying to change this story so much because of this, when the story itself was really, it had a lot to chew on. There was a lot on those bones with Mulan as far as what the story had to teach us. Just about where do you fit in? How did Mulan fit in? How did she end up finding her way in this story? So again, probably not my most controversial episode. I don't know, again, if this is going to file under my reviews analysis or maybe just, crazed talks by Josh. But what do you guys think? I mean, ultimately, what do you think about this whole deal with Mulan? I mean, especially if Disney was going to do this, and maybe I'll leave you with this, because these are some questions that I wanted to get to, and I feel like this episode's already gone on too long. If you're going to do this with Mulan, and you have an issue with the differences of authority between Mulan and Shang, and you just totally rip Shang out of the picture, why wasn't this done with Aladdin? I mean, Aladdin is a beggar boy, and Jasmine is a queen. Okay, there's obviously a difference of rank and authority there. I mean, why wasn't that changed? Why wasn't the Lion King altered? Okay, Simba's a king, and Nala is part of the pride, but she's not really like royalty from another pride or anything. So what's up with that? I mean, obviously she's sort of a subordinate compared to him. Why weren't those stories changed? I guess is my big question. Probably could be a lot to do with the production team, could be the writers behind it. I mean, this is all Disney, of course, but why? Why weren't some of these other stories changed in all of this? Are they just kind of catching up to it now and they felt like this was the story that they could do this with? Who knows? But to me, it's an interesting question, and one that I obviously want to pose, not just to be controversial or anything, but because I want people to think. I want you to think about these things, listener, as you're engaging with this podcast, as you're engaging with narratives, as you're engaging with stories out there. Is it true? Are these things true of our experiences and what we're being told and how we're experiencing them? So hope you enjoyed this episode. Let me know what you think. Comment, share, subscribe, all that kind of good stuff. I got some big changes happening too here on the Writer's Lens, and I'll be sharing those in the weeks to come. But again, I hope you guys are enjoying this podcast as it continues on into what will be its third year, I think, here at the end of July. Man, I can't believe it's already coming up here. But anyway, thanks for all the support, guys. Have a great rest of the week. This is Josh Alfalto for the Writer's Lens.